Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to give you your weekly forecast of April 15th through the 21st. So I want to begin with just taking you back to last week, the week of April 8th through the 14th. And I want to ask you, how was it for you? How does it land in your body? What's coming up for you now? And what are some of the revelations that you've had? I think the week ahead of April 15th to the 21st, I think it has great potential to be a week of integration. I'm not only an astrologer, but I'm also a coach. And one of the things that is so important to me in my work, especially with astrology, is that astrology becomes an embodied practice. And what I mean by that is that we don't merely just go day by day knowing what aspect is activated. Today is an eclipse, then we have a Mercury cazimi, then we have the moon in Taurus. All of that is beautiful and valuable information because astrology is a beautiful and valuable tool. But how we integrate and how we move with the energy is the point of having astrology as a tool. I'm bringing this into this week's episode because one of the things that I've noticed always as an astrologer, but especially over the last 6 weeks, is the anticipation and perhaps almost anxiety around all of these events. And I think that has to do with a few different components. I think one of them being how astrology is interpreted and presented to you as a viewer and as someone who is curious about astrology, right? So for me, it becomes, and it has become always so important to teach those that follow my work to slow down, to be mindful, to observe, how does this land in my body? The reason that I feel so passionate about this is because astrology is not just my profession. Astrology is not just facts to me. It's not just a way of putting together horoscopes, crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. Astrology for me has been an integrative tool for the last almost 10 years of my life in terms of healing a lot of trauma, understanding why a lot of things unfolded in the way that they did in my life, and how I can, from this point forward or from any point that I'm in my life, move with astrology hand in hand, understanding what astrology is trying to give me and tell me and inform me with, while at the same time coming back to myself and asking myself, well, how does my body feel about this? What is really true for me? When I listen, and this is what I invite you to do as well, when you listen to me or any other astrologer, really take into account how your body responds to how that message is being delivered, right? Because when we don't, we give agency to other people, in this case, astrologers, who are going through their own process, through their own things, and we are making their process and their energy our own. And that's not what any tool is supposed to do. Any tool, whether it's therapeutic, esoteric, somatic, whatever it is always meant to bring you back to yourself. I have experienced eclipse seasons and have observed people experience eclipse seasons that have been absolutely life-changing, 1,000%. And I have also, from my own experience and from working with clients, observed myself and others walk through eclipse seasons day by day, observing the response of the body, observing the thoughts, observing the conversations that are had, observing how the astrology actually amplifies what's going on in my life versus dictating what's going on in my life. I really wanted to create this video and share this with all of you today because astrology is too beautiful of a tool, is too beautiful of an ancient wisdom to cheapen with any kind of clickbait or fear-mongering type of content. And so this isn't an attack on anyone. That's not where I'm coming from. I'm just bringing this in because I don't think that it's been spoken about before, at least not that I know of, and not that I've heard. And I think that it's a way for me to make clear what this means to me, especially if you're going to consume my content. So I wanted to start there because, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the week ahead has the potential to integrate a lot of things that have been going on, not just the last 2-3 weeks, but the last 4 to 6 weeks, right? But it's important that you understand how what I say lands in your body and what your body tells you about the message it's receiving. That's how we integrate all of this information. Now, with all of that said, let's get started. Monday, April 15th, we have Mercury, still retrograde, in the sign of Aries, create a conjunction or a coming together with Chiron in Aries. Okay, so one of the things that is very important to keep in mind with astrology is that any time that the cosmos presents us with a pattern, especially in a short period of time, it is the cosmos trying to deliver a very specific message to us. Mercury conjunct Chiron is not the first time in the last 6 weeks that Mercury and Chiron have met. This is actually the second time. And they are going to meet again 1/3 time. So the first time was when Mercury was not retrograde yet. It was actually direct, and it was on March 20th. Second time is April 15th. And then the third time is going to be May 7th. The cosmos tend to deliver patterns of connections between planets in threes, and they tend to do that quite often. Sometimes it's more, but it's usually 3. The conjunction, the coming together of the two planetary energies coming together, the one that you want to pay attention to the most is the second one, because that marks the before and after of that particular event. So this is going to really mark the middle ground of this Mercury retrograde cycle that started on April 1st, but it was already in its pre-retrograde shadow phase in March, especially by March 20th. So what does this mean? Let's break it down. Mercury, the planet of communication, short distance travel, yes, but also, and most importantly, Mercury being the planet that represents the way that we think, the thoughts that are running through our mind, the way that we perceive ourselves, what we believe ourselves possible and capable of. When we communicate with others, what we believe about ourselves says everything about the delivery of how we communicate with others and about what we are communicating. The conversations that we engage in, the content that we consume, all of that is Mercury ruled in the zodiac. So when you pay attention to the conversations you're having, to the content that you're consuming, that is huge information as to what your Mercury is doing in your own life, in your own chart. Mercury in Aries, I mean, how perfect is the cosmos to have a Mercury retrograde in Aries when we have a solar eclipse in Aries at the same time. That doesn't happen all the time. And the last time that we had a solar eclipse in Aries at the exact degree that we had it in last week, which is at 19 degrees Aries, was back in 2005, which affected the unfolding of our lives specifically for 2 years that then really marked the trajectory of the last 20 years of our lives. This is the same. But with Mercury coming together with Chiron, remember, March 20th, April 15th, and May 7th, you want to track how you have been invited to look at your shadow thoughts, to look at your limiting belief systems, to look at what you believe is possible for you to have, to create, to manifest, whether it's a career, a relationship, your life looking and feeling a certain way, and the pain and the wounds that tend to be associated with those thoughts. Okay, so beyond paying attention to the dates that I mentioned for this Mercury Chiron conjunction, don't get stuck on the dates. I want to give you the dates because as an astrologer, it's fun and it's important that you know those dates. But instead of looking at like, okay, what happened March 20th and what's happening April 15th and what's going to happen on May 20th, I really invite you to begin taking a step back from looking at astrology in that way and begin looking at astrology as an unfolding energy that at any given moment is just highlighting and amplifying what your soul is asking you to look at. Okay, and that's a very different way of working with astrology and actually having it be a visceral and embodied experience. Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, I invite you to think about the types of conversations that you have been having with yourself, with others, the types of thoughts that have been coming up about yourself. Perhaps these thoughts have been about shame. I am a burden. I am not enough. I am ruined. I don't know how to do relationships right. What is wrong with me? Why do I struggle with this? Why do I show up in this way? The reason I'm naming these themes that are just a few is because that's what Chiron represents. And during an eclipse season, these themes, these shadow parts are meant to really be amplified so that we can look at them and begin to choose how we move through life side by side, and over time create enough loving space from the soul, from our bodies, to transcend those shadow parts taking the lead in our lives. So to me, everything I've just explained to you is the epitome of your thoughts create your reality. But it's not that simple. It's more about going within and saying, and asking yourself, do these thoughts, do I actually believe these thoughts about myself? Do these stories even resonate with me anymore? What am I beginning to discover about what is possible for me in my career, in my life, in my relationships? And how, because of the amplification of Chiron, which is going to poke at the wound, not to poke at you, but so that you pay attention to it and learn to hold it with love and compassion, and really begin to say, how do I hold the possibility of who I know I can become and what's actually showing itself up for me now? And that's how we begin the week. That is the first aspect of the week, which is the second of 3 conjunctions between Mercury and Chiron. So far beyond you deciding, like, what am I going to do next? What does that mean? I really invite you to allow what I just said. How do you hold the possibility of what can be and what's actually coming up? How do you hold those two things and begin to create enough space within yourself and your body to be able to hold multiple truths at once? Because the fact that there might be, for some of you, I think for most people actually, this vision of a better possibility in whatever way that lands for you in your life, the fact that it's coming up, it means that it's already done. It means that somewhere deep down inside of you, you know that that's attainable, you know that that's possible. But then over the next 6 months, it becomes your responsibility to build the bridge that takes you from where you currently are to where you want to be. Now, does that mean that everything will come to manifestation in 6 months? No, because this is much more of an internal process of getting you to where you are internally, to where you want to be internally, that can then manifest something greater in the long run. Tuesday, April 16th, we have Venus coming into conjunction with the North Node in Aries at 15 degrees Aries. Okay, so what Venus in Aries is inviting us to lean into is to get very curious about what our relationship, Venus, to courage and starting all over, Aries, is about, especially considering the climate and the season that we're in. So it's important to understand that just because certain planetary placements have certain traditional interpretations to them, how the archetype of that placement, like a Venus and Aries, will really shift and change a little bit, only to amplify the much bigger lesson that is trying to land for us according to the season that we're in. So if we are in eclipse season, and for instance, April 15th was about that Mercury Chiron conjunction. What are the thoughts, the conversations, and all of the things that have been going on? Venus and Aries brings in the component as to what is the relationship with everything that you have been experiencing thus far. What is your relationship to themes around Aries themes, which are, again, courage, the willingness to start again. And that doesn't just imply I'm going to leave this relationship, I'm going to leave this town, I'm going to leave this career and start all over again. For some people, it is that, but this is very much about how do I feel about, for instance, feeling like I'm starting again in my relationship. I think relationships have been a huge, huge theme during this eclipse season, whether it's, with a romantic partner. I've noticed it a lot in friendships. In some of the collaborations that I've had, things have shifted in a really beautiful way. And then the question that Venus in Aries then brings is, what is my relationship to essentially a leveling up? Because we have to remember, we're still in eclipse season, and eclipse seasons are about significant endings and significant new beginnings. So it isn't, don't think about it as an all or nothing, stay or leave. For some people, it is that. For most of the time, it is about our relationship has functioned like this thus far. What have the last couple of weeks shown us about how we want to move differently together, right? So Venus and Aries here is also about what is the relationship that I have to my fire, to my anger, to my fierceness, to my spiciness, to my edginess. Because I think that whenever we have this much fire energy in the zodiac, or activated at the same time in the zodiac, it is about taking us to experience, again, at a visceral physical level, the expression of that element, which is in this case fire, right? And in this case, it's about the themes that I mentioned a few moments ago. Venus and Aries meeting with the North Node representing a point of evolutionary growth, which essentially is about how has my relationship with Aries themes, how has that come from a place of soul, the North Node in Aries? Whenever we're talking about the nodes, we have to remember that those are soul lessons much more than human lessons. Our ego then simply becomes the conduit for those soul lessons to be expressed in our human reality with our relationships, our work in the world, how we feel in our lives, how we want to experience our life, right? And so Venus coming together with the North Node truly signifies an elevation in not just the relationship that we have with others, because this is also a placement that can lend itself to having healing conversations with another, especially because we also have a Mercury Chiron conjunction this same week. But it's also about healing and being incredibly kind to parts of ourselves that we may feel shame around, that we may feel embarrassment about, that we have judged, all to recognize that a lot of times the judgments that we have about ourselves are judgments that we have internalized from others, and we've believed them. And so this Venus North Node conjunction, similarly to yesterday's Mercury Chiron conjunction, is about a healing connection to the self. This is why this week is so important to integrate. How do I feel about myself? What are the parts of me that have come up that in the past I have judged really harshly, but I don't want to judge myself in that way anymore. So how can I hold myself with love, grace, and compassion? And understanding how much courage it actually takes to do that. Because we live in a world that has convinced us that in order for us to be loved or to deserve grace, we first have to be punished. We first have to pay our dues and pay the debts. And that's simply not true. Because when we get in touch with our soul and when we connect to spirit, we understand that there is no judgment there, that there is simply love, and that there is love there to guide us through each and one of the experiences of our lives, regardless of the decisions that we've made along the way. And even bigger than that, it's the understanding that each and every decision along the way has led you to this moment in time. And hopefully this moment in time with the Venus North Node conjunction, you realize this is about the healing of the relationship with yourself. April 17th and 18th, we do not have any specific events. Now, what I love about that is that we have, again, the opportunity to integrate so much of what Monday and Tuesday present us with. So Friday, April 19th is actually a very active day that leads us into the weekend. So on Friday, April 19th, we have, and I'm going to look at my notes here, we have Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus at 18 degrees Aries. We have Mars in Pisces sextile Jupiter and Taurus at 21 degrees, and we have the Sun entering Taurus. So let's break that down into plain English. So we start the week off with Mercury and Venus doing their things, and then come Friday, they come together. Mercury and Venus come together. In the zodiac, Mercury and Venus actually have a really lovely relationship. Consider the dynamic between Mercury and Venus as like the bestie that you have that you just call up at any time and be like, hey, I'm hungry. You want to go grab a sandwich? Hey, you want to go grocery shopping with me? You want to go running errands with me? It is that type of bestie energy that you just feel absolutely comfortable with, that you don't have to get dressed up for. It's not like a thing. It's just like, let's go, let's hang out, let's talk. With that said, Mercury retrograde in Aries and Venus in Aries, it's like, hey, homie, how you been? It's been a few weeks. Tell me all about it, right? And this is a really beautiful check-in with the self. One of the things I invite you to do this Friday is really take the time to integrate what this entire week has brought up for you. If there is any day that is beautiful for integration, is Friday, April 19th, because of the meeting of Mercury, cognitive thought, communication, journaling, and Venus, the relationship with the self. Now, on a more practical interpretation of all of this, yes, Mercury is still retrograde, but Venus here and Mercury past its halfway point of its retrograde period. This is about having certain conversations, perhaps having certain conversations with certain people that you want to create something in the future with, and that it's still like the brainstorming period. The flip side of this is that if you are having conversations with someone else, especially in an important relationship, and this happens to be somewhat of a difficult conversation, I think that the other aspects around this day actually support having that difficult conversation. But what you want to be mindful of is that fiery energy and being mindful of what you have learned along the last couple of weeks and what you really want to express. Because if there has been resistance of you or another to receive the lessons of this season, then a conversation at this point can just kind of like fly off the handle and you not understand why. But if we're looking at this from another lens, this is about having the courage to say, look, this is what's come up for me. And this is what I feel I deserve, right? And that can be, again, in personal, important relationships, or even if you're going on a job interview, this can be having the courage to ask for more based on if you have been doing research, if you have been doing like internal work to receive more, different things that are about having conversations around what is landing for you. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, another aspect of this day is Mars in Pisces creating a sextile to Jupiter in Taurus. I think this is really beautiful because we have to remember that Mars is still within an orb of conjunction. It's still connecting with Saturn. And so Mars and Saturn is about slow and steady action will get us through this. Slow and steady action will help us create that bridge from where we are now to where we want to be. Slow and steady action. But the fact that Mars is no longer just feeling contained by the rings of Saturn, by the boundaried rings of Saturn, and it's actually connecting with a much more expansive energy of Jupiter, and Jupiter saying, yes, you still have to be boundaried, and there are certain things you have to move slow, but you can do this. Jupiter in the zodiac is the cheerleader. Jupiter in the zodiac represents that lantern of light that we carry when we are experiencing some dark periods in our life. That is what Jupiter represents. It is the promise of a more optimistic future. But it does require in Taurus that you show up for yourself. So Mars in Pisces can want to lean into perhaps old patterns, perhaps an old way of doing things. And then Jupiter in Taurus not only is cheerleading this action forward, but it's saying, but you still have to commit to yourself because of Taurus. You still have to take slow and steady action. So whatever that means to you on a practical level, I really invite you to welcome in the pace and the slowness that something in your life is inviting you to take in. Because there is something big here that for everyone has been ignited. And that big thing looks different for everybody. Okay. So what does it look like for you? And that big thing requires that we don't rush into it. And that's what Mars in Pisces, conjunct Saturn in Pisces, but connecting to Jupiter and Taurus is saying. Commit to yourself, commit to the process and let go of the outcome and trust that you are guided and supported. Okay. And of course, on April 19th, we also enter Taurus season. Guys, I am looking forward to Taurus season. While we have had Jupiter in Taurus, Uranus in Taurus over, for some time now, very activated amongst one another, we have not had an Earth season since Capricorn season. So everything that has been happening, Aquarius season, Pisces season, Aries season, has been somewhat of a whirlwind, which is why we may not feel grounded. It's like, where did that come from? What does this mean? Why do I feel sick? Why do I feel tired? Ooh, Taurus season as of April 19th is welcomed, because what Taurus season is going to really begin to do throughout its season is ground a lot of these things, ground a lot of these lessons. For some people, is going to help them ground a lot of these lessons, I suggest, through the body. And for other people, it's going to really begin helping you take practical action towards the things that you want to do, towards the, inspirations, especially for those of you who are creative. You realized, man, I'm really going to go for that. It's scary. It takes my courage, but I'm going to do it. Taurus season is so great for you to begin creating the plan, connecting with the soul of your project, of your creativity at a body level, because Taurus rules the senses in the zodiac. And it's always an invitation for us to ask ourselves, how does this land in my body and how does it feel to me? Okay. So I am so looking forward to Taurus season this time around. Saturday, April 20th, we have the very much anticipated Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Okay, so let's ground this energy a little bit. It is important to understand that planets work in what are called synodic cycles, okay? And synodic cycles are when two planets come together, and depending on how long it takes each of them to move through the zodiac, that is the amount of time that is going to take them to come together again and complete another synodic cycle, okay? In this case, we have not had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction since 2011. So think back to 2011 in general, and think back to something that had to do with the interruption of how a part of your life was functioning, okay? And how the interrupting of that, because you moved on to something else, in the long run created growth and expansion. Okay, so I'm going to kind of ground this even a little bit more by sharing an example of my own experience. So in 2011, for those of you that don't know, before I was an astrologer, I was a legal secretary and a paralegal. I worked in law firms for 10 years. But in 2011 was when I actually started a paralegal certification program, right? So prior to that, I was just doing like random admin work, office work here and there. And the interruption of that pattern, the pattern of how I work in the world, was provided by me starting that certification program that was about 9 months. Okay. So I interrupted the pattern of how I worked in the world, Uranus, by committing myself to something that in the long term helped me expand and grow, Jupiter. Okay. Did I start the program right at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction? No. I remember starting the program around January of 2011, I believe. But here's why I'm sharing this with you, because it doesn't matter. When we look at astrology from a very technical perspective, each sign is made up of 30 degrees. And when two planets are within 10 degrees from one another, they are considered within an orb of conjunction, okay? So as these two planets were moving closer and closer and closer and closer together before they actually created a conjunction, I was going to school to get my certification as a paralegal, right? And then eventually, when I finished that certification, I went to work at a law firm. And that is where that part of my work career started, okay? The reason that I'm giving you this example is that it is important to understand that it's not just that something is going to manifest immediately and bam, all of your dreams come true this Saturday, April 20th, done. That's not how this works, especially when we're talking about planets like Uranus and Jupiter. Uranus and Jupiter are planets in the zodiac that represent much bigger cycles with much broader themes that are meant to carry us for a much longer time in our lives, okay? Now, for those of you in the Substack subscription, in your horoscopes, I'm going to let you know exactly where in your chart this happens. And really, And here's a safe timeline to kind of, so that you can have something to hold on to. We have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction Saturday, April 20th, okay? I would say give it about a year to 2 years to see what begins to unfold that is going to create a very Taurus foundation for you that is beginning, that the energy is being implemented, planted, because we had a solar eclipse in Aries, which we still have to process and integrate into our lives, that is really going to inform the trajectory probably of the next decade for you. Okay. Now, I know that for some people that lands like, well, do I have to wait 10 years to do the thing? Blah, blah, blah. No. If you're working with me and you're consuming my content, I'm a Capricorn through and through. I respect and appreciate the time that things take. One, because I can't control it. Life, and that doesn't mean that I have always been in the space of, oh, whatever the universe wants, whenever the universe wants. No, this is a lesson that as a Capricorn, I came here to learn, to really respect and appreciate the time that certain things unfolding takes, because every single time, at the end of it, I have appreciated exactly how long it needed to take. Okay. So no, it doesn't mean that nothing is going to happen. It doesn't mean that you have to wait 10 years for something to happen. Your life will unfold each and every single day within this period of time. But what this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction represents, where Taurus is in your chart, is the interruption of a particular pattern that is going to change based on an action that you take, that is going to create a different foundation of growth for you in the next decade. And so I invite you to really take this in this way, because if you think about how the last couple of weeks have been for you, all of the things that have been dawning on you with these eclipses, the truths that you've had to accept about yourself and about others, that is a lot. And it's not just something that you're meant to like, okay, I get it, let's move forward. It's not. It's really not. These are soul lessons that you have to integrate and introduce to your body, to your nervous system, so that your human begins living life through those soul lessons. And if there is anything that I leave you with in my content in this channel, is that let's stop trying to rush through life so that we can just manifest and have this dream reality. And let's start embracing who we become along the way. Because so much of Taurus energy is about the becoming, is about the very natural expression of the soul through the body and the senses. And that's a very different interpretation and a very different experience of a beautiful connection between Uranus and Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. Sunday, April 21st, we have the sun in Taurus create a square, a 90-degree angle to Pluto in Aquarius at 2 degrees Aquarius. And we also have Venus in Aries come together in a conjunction to Chiron in Aries at 19 degrees. Again, let's break each one of these down into plain English. Okay, so when we have the sun create a square, a 90-degree angle to Pluto, this is really beautiful, because I think that this is why it matters that this week becomes a period and a week of integration and really being with yourself and really processing, either with yourself or in safe space with a therapist or a coach, everything that has been coming up for you and letting it truly land in your body. Because whenever we have a 90-degree angle in the zodiac, traditionally, squares are interpreted as aspects of tension or hard aspects. And that's true. But from my experience, again, within myself and in coaching clients, is that squares are a catalyst for change. It is the equivalent of the pressure that is created before a diamond is formed. Okay. So here we have the sun in Taurus, which is our presence, our beginning to come out of this eclipse season in a much more grounded space. It's almost like we're coming out of all of like the smoke created by all of the fire and Aries energy and kind of like, okay, what does it look like now? And am I okay? Did I make it? Did I survive? And the square to Pluto in Aquarius is that realization, I am not the same. I'm not the same. I am not the same person I was back in March. There is something that has shifted fundamentally within me, whether it's one thing or 10 things. There is something that has shifted fundamentally within me. And how does that threaten the expression of my human and egoic self in this world, in my life, and in my relationships? So 90 degrees, squares, aspects of tension require a certain level of presence and slowing down to really activate the growth of that energy in our bodies. And so the square is a moment of tension that for some people can manifest in erratic behavior. It can manifest in feeling angry. It can manifest in feeling incredibly conflicted within yourself. If I'm not that, then who am I? If this relationship is not going to move forward, then how are we going to do this, right? We are at the precipice. There is an internal feeling that we are at the precipice of having to begin to take action based on the lessons that we have learned over the last several weeks. And that's the tension right there. Okay. Now, Venus and Chiron coming together. Remember, Chiron has been activated all week. Venus has been activated all week. And now it's Venus and Chiron that come together, especially in relationships. It is the pain and the wound that either comes with choosing yourself or the pain and the wounds that have to be activated within a partnership in order to learn how to hold that pain and that wound differently to move forward in a much more honest way. Okay. So let's say that this has to do with a significant personal relationship with you, and both of you have decided that the relationship is going to move forward. Okay. We're moving forward in a much more honest way. We're moving forward in a way that requires a commitment to repairing this connection, a commitment to repairing this relationship in an actionable way. Now, that is going to unfold over the next couple of weeks. But again, because this week is such a week of integration, this is about the landing of that. This is about the understanding of just how much commitment this next phase of the relationship, for instance, is going to take. Let's say that this for you has to do with you embarking on something new. You are realizing, I have a lot of potential. I can do that. I can do what these other people can do because I have a voice, because I have a message to share. Okay, the weekend, because of the activation of Uranus and Jupiter on Saturday, and because of the square between the sun and Pluto on Sunday, it can feel rather intense, especially internally. But this is you saying, you know what? This threatens, air quotes, threatens, or yeah, threatens the existence of the role that I've been playing thus far with my creativity, with my career, with my work in the world. And I know that the leveling up that's next requires for me to show up differently. And the 90-degree angle right there, the square, the aspect of tension is feeling possibly momentarily, can I really do it? Am I up for the task? Is this really it? And Venus conjunct Chiron there is about how are we in relationship with that wound? How are we in relationship with those parts of us that are scared? How are we in relationship with the tension that is coming up with us becoming that diamond? Okay. So I personally, this upcoming week of April 15th to the 21st is my favorite week because I think that there is so much potential for you to really tune into what the messages of this eclipse season have been for you. But you have to be willing to move through things slowly, be mindful, and be present. And most importantly, be curious. Mercury retrograde. Let's look at this from a different perspective. What else can be true in the unfolding of these events? How can I be curious instead of resistant and judgmental? Okay. Now, finally, I want to share that I am creating an event where I am going to hold a group of people to integrate all of these lessons into your body through my work. So if you want to stay in touch and you want to learn more about that, it'll be over the next couple of weeks. I suggest that you sign up for the wait list below and you will receive more information as this unfolds. Thank you so much for joining me another week. I hope you have an easeful week, and I'll talk to you next week.